Elizabeth Myers sat in her old armchair by the fireplace. The fire crackled, casting a soft, warm light across the room. A photo album lay on her lap, and a cup of tea long gone cold sat on the table beside her. Her gaze was fixed on the portrait of her husband, Henry, on the wall. His smile always reminded her of the best moments of their lives. But now, in this house they had built together over 40 years, there was silence. A silence that seemed almost oppressive. How things had changed, Elizabeth thought. Henry always said that home was not just a place, it was our heart. But now that heart seemed empty. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Elizabeth rose from her chair, a little more slowly than usual, and walked to the door. It was her family, her son Tom, his wife Kate, and their 2 children. They brought a kind of comfort to this difficult time, but their presence also made her feel strangely anxious. "Mom, we thought you'd be glad to see us," Tom said, hugging her. Anna Kate brought a large cake, and the children, Jason and Emma, and immediately ran off to play in the garden. But Elizabeth couldn't help but notice Kate carefully examining the room, its furniture, its paintings, and even the antiqued clock that had belonged to her grandmother. Mom," Tom began over dinner when everyone was already gathered at the table. "We wanted to talk to you about the future." Elizabeth looked at him in surprise. "About the future? What do you mean?" "You're on your own now," he continued. "We thought it would be better for you if we helped you with the paperwork and the bills and everything, just so you wouldn't have to worry." Kate nodded, adding, "Yes, Mom. We can take care of it. You deserve a break." Elizabeth smiled, but the offer made her a little uneasy. "Thanks, but I'm fine," she replied. "Henry left me everything I needed. I appreciate your concern, but I don't need any help right now." Tom exchanged a look with Kate but said nothing. Their visit ended late in the evening. They said their goodbyes, and the house fell silent again. Elizabeth couldn't sleep that night. Her intuition told her that there was more to Tom and Kate's offer of help. The next morning, Elizabeth decided to go through her bank statements to make sure everything was in order. Her husband had always taken care of the finances, but now the responsibility fell on her shoulders. She sat down at her desk, opened her laptop, and tried to log into her bank account. But the system reported, access denied. "Atapa? What nonsense," she muttered. Elizabeth called the bank. The operator politely explained that the account had been merged with another and access had been granted to a person with a power of attorney. A power of attorney. "I didn't give anyone any authority," she exclaimed. The operator apologized and advised her to contact a lawyer to clarify the details. Elizabeth immediately called her son. "Tom, I can't log into my bank account." "Do you know anything about this?" she asked. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Tom answered, trying to sound calming, "Mom, I've already taken care of everything. Don't worry about it. We thought it would be easier for everyone." "Easier for everyone?" she asked, feeling her heart tighten. "Yes, Mom. We just wanted you to stop worrying about the little things," he replied, but there was something insincere in his voice. Elizabeth hung up the phone, feeling her anxiety grow. At that same night, she went out into the garden, trying to calm herself. Her gaze fell on the lighted window of the room where all the important documents were kept. She suddenly remembered that she had trusted Tom with access to the safe a few years ago when she had been in the hospital. She went into the room, opened the safe, and saw that the house and bank documents were gone. In their place lay a notig. "Mom, I have transferred all the papers to a lawyer to be safe. Don't worry." Elizabeth stood clutching the note in her hand, unable to believe her eyes. Her hands were shaking, and anger was boiling inside. What did he do? And why without my permission? She whispered. At that moment, she realized Tom and Kate were hiding something. Elizabeth couldn't sleep that night. Her thoughts revolved around the missing documents and Tom's strange behavior. She decided not to leave it at that. Her intuition, which had helped her more than once in her life, told her that her son and daughter-in-law were hiding something. At dawn, she went to the room where Henry's old boxes of financial statements were kept. She searched every shelf, but found nothing important. Finally, her gaze fell on an old drawer that Henry always kept locked. Maybe there's something there that will explain their behavior, she thought, feeling her fingers tremble. The drawer was empty, but there was a scrap of paper at the bottom. It was a note in Henry's handwriting, addressed to Herg, Lizzie. Always be careful who you trust. Even the closest people can betray you when it comes to money. The word struck her like lightning. That same day, Elizabeth called her lawyer, John Parker. John, I need your help. I suspect that Tom and Kate took my documents without my permission, she said. Elizabeth, this is serious. And if you're sure, we can check it out. John replied, sensing her anxiety. They arranged to meet at his office the next day. As Elizabeth prepared for the meeting, she noticed that Kate had begun to come to her house more often. She would always find an excuse either to bring pastries or to offer to help with the cleaning. But each time, Kate seemed too interested in the contents of the closets and chests. One day, Elizabeth decided to act cunningly. Kate, you're so attentive to me, but I notice you're looking at things in this house. Are you looking for something? She asked, keeping her cool. Kate laughed, but her laugh sounded strained. No, Mrs. Myers, I just want to help. This house is such a treasure, so much history. You know how much Tom and I love it. These words only increased Elizabeth's suspicions. Elizabeth decided to arrange a meeting with Tom and Kate. As she invited them to dinner, but this time the atmosphere was tense from the start. Tom sat at the table, tapping his fingers on a glass of water, and Kate busied herself looking around the room as if assessing its value. Elizabeth set a kettle of hot tea on the table and sat down opposite her son. Tom, I wanted to talk about what's going on, she began. Mom, what do you mean? His voice was confident, but his eyes showed concern. Fayu. No, the deeds to the house are gone, she said bluntly. And I know they're now in Kate's name. Can you explain how that happened? Kate replied immediately, trying to look calm. Mrs. Myers, it was done for your safety. You know how hard it is to maintain a big house these days. We thought it would be best to take care of it so you don't have to worry. Safety. And you didn't even ask me? Elizabeth's voice rose. Tom tried to intervene. Mom, it's just a formality. You're staying in the house as before. We just made sure everything was in order. But these words only fueled her anger. Made it. You took my property from me. This is my home. Tom, how could you? Kate lost her patience and replied coldly, Elizabeth, you don't understand. We saved you from having to deal with this. We did what needed to be done. Elizabeth realized that these people didn't even regret what they had done. Her heart ached, but she didn't let herself cry. After Tom and Kate left, Elizabeth sat in silence for a long time. She realized that she could no longer trust her own son. The next day, she met with John Parker. He explained to her in detail the process of reclaiming the property and preparing the lawsuit. Elizabeth, this won't be easy. They used a power of attorney you signed years ago. But we can prove that it was done illegally, John said. Elizabeth nodded. She knew that this conflict would destroy her family, but there was no other way out. Elizabeth began to carefully prepare for the return of her property. John Parker examined Tom and Kate's financial records, and Elizabeth herself found several old documents in the house that could help in the case. One day John called Elizabeth, we found serious evidence. They used your power of attorney to re-register the house and then mortgaged it to the bank to pay off their debts. This news shocked Elizabeth. They risked my house for their debts. How could they do this? John reassured her. We can file a lawsuit and prove that it was illegal. But you must be prepared for a long fight. Elizabeth gathered all her willpower. She decided that she would not stop until justice was restored. After talking to John and discovering Tom and Kate's debts, Elizabeth felt her life falling apart. She couldn't understand how those she loved and trusted could do such a cruel thing. She sat in her bedroom, looking in the mirror. In the reflection, she saw herself a tired woman who had lived her life giving everything to her family. Her hands, wrinkled but still strong, held an old photograph of her with Henry. What would you do if you were here? She asked quietly, turning to the portrait. Elizabeth decided she had to act. She knew that her path to justice would be painful, but to leave things as they would mean losing herself. The next morning, she went to Tom's house. Kate opened the door, and her face immediately took on a wary expression. Mrs. Myers, you didn't give me any notice of your visit, she said, trying to sound friendly. I don't need to? Elizabeth replied sharply. It concerns my papers and my house. I need to talk to Tom. Kate let her in. Tom was sitting in the living room, leafing through a magazine. He tensed up when he saw his mother. Mom, why are you here? He asked, trying to hide his concern. Elizabeth sat down opposite him. Tom, I know what you did. You used my power of attorney to register the house in your name, and now I know you mortgaged it to the bank. How could you? Tom tried to make excuses, but his voice was weak. Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you. We were just trying to work out our problems. Problems? You put my property, my life at risk, and all for what? Debt. Her voice became loud, and tears filled her eyes. Kate intervened. Elizabeth, we thought it would be better for everyone. You won't be able to take care of the house yourself anymore. These words angered Elizabeth even more. You don't get to decide what's best for me. And this is my home, and I would never let you do that, she said, standing up. She left their home with a feeling of deep disappointment. Elizabeth filed a lawsuit. News of the family conflict quickly spread among neighbors and acquaintances, but Elizabeth no longer cared about what other people thought. At the first hearing, Attorney John presented evidence that Tom and Kate's actions were illegal. He showed how they had manipulated the power of attorney and used it for their own benefit. The judge listened carefully, but Tom and Kate did not give up either. Their lawyer said they were acting solely in Elizabeth's best interests. My client never consented to the real estate re-registration. All of this was done without her knowledge, John insisted. Elizabeth's words at the hearing were emotional but confident. I trusted my son and his wife. But they betrayed me. I just want to get back what is rightfully mine. These words made Tom hang his head. After the court ruling, Elizabeth got her house back, but this triumph did not bring her the relief she had hoped for. The family was torn apart. Tom stopped calling, and Kate in no attempt to hide her hostility. Elizabeth was left alone in the house, which now seemed too big and empty to her. One evening she sat in silence, looking at old photographs. One of them caught her eye, young Tom, with a large bouquet of flowers he had given her for Mother's Day. When did it all go wrong? She thought. The old memories warmed her heart, but they also hurt. Tom had always been her favorite son. She couldn't understand how greed and debt could make him betray her trust. The next morning, Elizabeth received an unexpected visitor. It was her granddaughter, Emma. Grandma, I know what Dad and Mom did was wrong. But please don't leave us, the girl said, hugging her. Elizabeth patted her on the head. Emma, it's not your fault. And I will always be your grandmother, but adults have to be responsible for their actions, she replied, trying to hold back tears. Emma's words deeply affected Elizabeth. She realized that she couldn't just cut off her family no matter the pain. That evening, Tom came to her door. He looked haggard, his eyes filled with remorse. "Mom, can I come in?" he asked. Elizabeth nodded silently and invited him inside. "Mom, I know I made a mistake. I thought I was saving my family, but I destroyed ours," he said, his head bowed. Elizabeth was silent for a long time. Her heart was torn between anger and love for her son. "Tom, I will forgive you, but you have to earn it. But you have to change, or we will lose each other forever," she finally said.